welcome to Loving the Planets for the month of December. As your December forecast, we're going to go through the different signs and talk about what's going on for each sign. I'm Armand Diaz on Long Island.
And I'm Margaret Gray in Dublin, Ireland. And by the way, stay tuned, everybody, because even if we're not talking about your sign right now, we might even go back to it towards the end. So do wait till the very end if you can.
This is an eclectic mix of stuff about your sign. It's not necessarily linear. For example, I'm going to start off talking about the fire signs, Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. And I want to start off right away with Aries. Aries needs a little special thing this month because the month begins with a Uranus-Venus opposition on the Aries Libra axis, and so Aries might really be feeling, especially as the month begins, but this is a very charged month for the fire signs. There could be a real push-pull between independence and relationship, where we feel like we need to be with the other person and love, and it's all about the relationship, and where it's like I got to do my thing. And so this is a big, especially for Aries, it's a big thing. I think if you're a Leo or a Sagittarius, you're going to just feel this as kind of a little bit more of that kind of upbeat, fun energy. I think Leo and Sagittarius particularly are feeling it kind of along the lines of, let's go out, let's have some fun, let's get a little bit of passion going. I'm feeling the love. It's a very fiery month, which November was not. November had very little, especially the first half of the month, very little fire, sometimes no fire. December, very fiery month, a lot of passion. Holiday time, which is often kind of a quasi-romantic time, if the Hallmark Channel movies are any kind of an indication. It's sort of romantic, and I think that the fire signs might really be feeling that as we come towards the new year. So Aries, a little bit of tension, especially as the month begins. In general, though, fire signs are getting quite a bit of energy. Now, fire signs especially look towards the period after the new moon in Sagittarius, which is on December 7th. And that's also the time when Mercury goes direct. So the month may begin with a little bit, the waning energy. It may not, December 3rd may not be the height of passion or anything like that. But I think eventually, as the last 3 weeks of the month, you definitely feel the energy picking up.
Right. Well, that's kind of exciting for both of us, isn't it? Thank you, Armand. Although I wasn't sure I was keen on the Aries bit about a little bit of tension, but we'll skirt right by that. I'll stick with
couple of days, the beginning of the month. That's all. It's the beginning of the month.
Good. Glad to hear that. Well, I'm going to look at Taurus and Scorpio, and this is a very interesting month for this opposition because really the way I would define it, it's really a lot of honesty and a lot of passion. So first of all, we're looking at Mercury reversing back into Scorpio on December 1st until December 12th. So this feels like a wonderful opportunity to really get to the bottom of truth, passion, maybe some secrets, those kind of issues in relationships, which are going to be expressed much more easily once, of course, Mercury goes into Sagittarius. So this is really the digging under the ground so that then the expression can come out later. So from the 13th onwards of December, it's going to be easier to express those things. So spend the early part of the month doing a little bit of digging. Now, on the 9th and 11th of December, there's a quincunx to Chiron and then to Uranus. So however uncomfortable it may be, honest communication really, really offers an amazing opportunity for healing. So we don't often get these opportunities. So really, Taurus and Scorpio, if you've got your sun, your moon, personal planets in these signs or your angles, this is a great time for healing in relationships. We all know how important communication is in relationships. So this is a key time. And remember that this has been kind of sticking in your throat for a while, probably, so time to get it out. Now, on the 2nd of December, so we're moving kind of back to the beginning of the month, Venus moves into Scorpio, where it stays until January 7th. So this is the real passion bit. So if you've got a Venus in Scorpio, it's going to be your Venus return. So it's really a depth overhaul of your self-value, which is incredibly productive, of course, for relationships. So it's a great time for Taurus and Scorpio energy to really connect with what passion means to you. So, and it could, of course, bring in some passion and romance, because often when we do that internal work, it also reflects externally and it happens for us. So on the 16th, Saturn is going to be sextiling Venus. Great time to manifest something in the area of romance and passion. This, of course, is building up to the solstice on December 21st, which is really a beautiful time for unconditional love and romance, because Venus is going to be trining Neptune. So what a wonderful solstice. I mean, really for everyone, but particularly for these two signs. So the search and the desire is really for a spiritual connection with somebody special. So look out for those kind of twin soul connections around that time. The end of the month may well result in a deepening of current relationships. We've got the Venus-Pluto sextile, or it could be a very passionate encounter. So quite an amazing, passionate month really for these two signs. The beginning part, just be honest, really think about who do you need to communicate with and what do you need to communicate.
Excellent. It sounds like a pretty good month for those two signs.
Yes.
That's great. Hey, I did want to mention Aries. At the very end of the month, Mars gets into Aries on December 31st. It really are the last minutes of the year. So, Aries can look forward to that. You got your ruler coming home there.
So we've got a good new year coming up. Thank you.
Yeah, right. Exactly. The beginning of December is one thing. So let's talk a little bit about Libra. I'm going to give Libra its own little special little piece of thing here. And that is because Libra is ruled by Venus, and Venus is in Scorpio. And I think that, we've had the Venus retrograde, which I think sort of Libras kind of feel that a little bit more than others. Libras and Tauruses might feel that a little bit more because it's their ruling planet. And remember, we are talking about sun sign. We're also talking about ascendant sign, and to an extent, the moon, maybe even Venus, depending upon how you look at it, but certainly for sun signs. And I think that what's going on here with Venus having gone retrograde and then getting into Scorpio, I feel that Libras have kind of spent a couple of months sort of on hold in terms of relationship and love, as we all have, but especially I think Libras have really been feeling this with Venus retrograding in their sign. So essentially I would say that Libra has everything that you have said about Scorpio and Taurus is sort of also relevant to Libra. What might be a little bit harder is that Scorpio particularly can handle that sort of intensity, that passion, and sometimes Libra wants to keep things a little bit more on an even keel, a little bit less drama, maybe a little bit less passion. And this is a month where I think that, while the fire signs are out partying, and, Libra might be feeling things a little bit more intensely. And certainly the retrograde issues, anything that began in September, October, carried through November, it's still on the agenda for Libra in December. So a bit of an intense month for Libra.
Interesting, Armand. Yeah, that makes sense, of course, with Venus and Scorpio. Absolutely. So Cancer and Capricorn, and it's interesting because, of course, Capricorn is Earth, so this kind of feels very logical, but actually it isn't always the case that this month is actually all about December, about manifestation for these two signs. So it's quite a quiet start of the month, in fact, until winter solstice, when the sun moves into Capricorn. And then, of course, the sun in Capricorn shines a very bright light on any planets or angles in either of these signs. Now, this is also followed by a full moon at 0 degrees Cancer the following day, just after solstice, which squares Chiron. So the invitation from Chiron, of course, is always to heal wounds, or call them energy blocks, through unconditional love. So that's very, very important. And as this full moon, of course, is on the parental axis, anybody with planets in Capricorn or Cancer is really invited to heal and really focus on more of the lunar, loving, self-nurturing energy, particularly for anybody with Capricorn planets, for anybody with Cancer planets. You're really invited to integrate more of the Saturnian boundaried energies of manifestation. So just to keep in mind those two different kind of slight slants at that full moon. Now, also, of course, remember, that Saturn and Pluto are slowly moving through the sign of Capricorn. So at one stage or another, planets and angles at that stage are going to feel nudged in no uncertain way into transformation and manifestation. That depends what degree those planets are in your chart. But that if you have, anything in Cancer or Capricorn, it's going to be aspected by either the Saturn or the Pluto at some point. So this is going to, of course, affect all of your relationships. So that there are big, big changes happening. Now, for some, this may mean greater commitment to a relationship. For others, it may mean sometimes leaving a relationship in order to manifest greater commitment to yourself. So there's no right or wrong way to do this. It depends very much where you're at, what stage of life, what's going on for you. Plus, the nodes, of course, are currently on that axis. So they're going to land on your planets at some point. So notice when this happens, as relationship encounters during that time may feel a little bit fated, when the nodes are at play. So keep in mind the whole issue of commitment and the whole issue of manifestation. They're really both very key for you this month, but particularly, as I say, towards the end of the month after solstice rather than the earlier part of the month.
Yeah, really good points. Yeah, with the nodes and Pluto and Saturn in the signs there we're talking about, and then when the sun gets in there and you have the moon, the lunations and so on. Yeah, very intense, and especially at the end of the month. Wow. I mean, in a good way, I'm sure.
Absolutely. And one of the things is that even though we're talking specifically about December, it is that these big, slower moving energies are in those, are in the signs. We've got Uranus in Aries and then back into Taurus, of course, where it's going to move along. We've got, Pluto in Capricorn and Neptune in Pisces. So they're ongoing for years on end. So sometimes we forget, if they're in our sign, that actually they're still operating there.
Well, they get heated up when the sun goes through that sign. That's why it's so relevant this month. Now, actually, if Libra has a little bit of this, could be a bit uncomfortable type of energy. I think that Gemini and Aquarius, the other two air signs, also have a little bit of that going on for different reasons. Now, Gemini. The thing for Gemini, which likes to sort of keep things, a little on the lighter side sometimes, and sort of talk around things. The issue is that Mars spends the month in Pisces, and of course, Neptune is in Pisces. Chiron stations to go direct at the end of Pisces. So what we have is a lot of Piscean energy, a lot of vagueness, and actually Mercury, the ruler of Gemini, on Christmas Eve, December 24th, squares Neptune, which really, again, highlights this nebulous Neptunian energy. Now, you can take this a lot of different ways. I mean, it could be getting lost in a fantasy. It could be that this is a month where you just sort of play with the ideas. It could be a time when, everything just seems to be, let it flow, go, serendipitously go along and so on. Well, Chiron would seem to be, especially people who have late Gemini stuff, Chiron would seem to be really pushing in on the light and airy sense of things. But it is a little bit more nebulous. And again, as we're pulling out of the Venus retrograde and we kind of want to know where things are, maybe it's a little bit tougher for Gemini. Mercury's retrograde until the 7th. That's the ruler. I mean, there's just some stuff that says, Gemini should, enjoy it, feel it. It's good. Have some fun. But probably go with that instinct to keep things light, because you're not quite sure where things are with your relationships. It could be the fact that, you get a little over enthusiastic, maybe a little hopeless at sometimes. It's all just kind of a play type of thing, and got to keep that in mind. It's like, we'll get to the point where we'll get to the point where we know what's going on sooner rather than later, but probably a little bit of caution. I wouldn't, I don't want to deflate anybody or anything like that, but a little bit of caution. Aquarius, the if there's any wonkiness in the month for Aquarius, it's that Venus is in Scorpio, which is square to Aquarius, and so that Venusian intensity in Scorpio, that sort of exactly the passion that you were talking about with Scorpio and Taurus, that passion, that excitement, that and to a certain extent the attachment that can come up with Venus and Scorpio is a little bit, it's a little bit. It's not really on the Aquarian page. Aquarius likes to have a little bit of space and distance around things. Venus in Scorpio is a little bit more intense and sometimes clingy. And so there's a little bit of energy to kind of work through over there. And there's just not a lot of stuff directly hitting Aquarius, except the Sagittarian energy is very, very helpful. So, that will let any of the air signs, including Gemini, including Libra, it will let them have a little bit easier time of things, I think. A little bit more social, playful thing. Friends, groups, things like that, those relationships, which are quite important also, might really be highlighted this month. And also to even like in intimate relationships, maybe get away from some of that scorpionic intensity, or for Geminis and Libras as well, maybe get away from it a little bit by getting out. It's a good strategy for the air signs, I think, is to just get out and do some socializing rather than being, so locked into the one-to-one thing.
Yes, it's really about being in groups, isn't it? That kind of, it sort of dissipates a little bit of that intense energy. So Virgo Pisces, and the core themes I think for this month for those two signs, for that opposition, is really healing and integration. And, as I mentioned before, there's an ongoing backdrop, for planets' angles in these signs, which is Neptune going through Pisces. And it's encouraging us, to keep leaning into unconditional love. That's really what it's all about. Now, Chiron is back in the late degrees of Pisces until March. So it feels like there's a final clearing out of issues to do with, that sense of loneliness, aloneness, dependency, grief, maybe sadness to do with old relationships, or at least we project it onto that, but really it's that internal, grief that we all feel, existential grief, really. For anyone with planets and angles in Pisces, connecting with Neptune and Pisces spirituality can really alleviate the Chironian sadness. That's very, very important. Also creativity, the imagination, somehow to create a container for it, something that holds it. Now, Mars continues to travel through Pisces until January 1st, and awakening, of course, any planets and angles in this sign. And keep in mind that this can certainly bring romance, or even surrender if romance is not available or possible for any reason. So it makes it easier to kind of almost not give up. Surrendering is different because there's a sense of empowerment in surrendering rather than giving up. But it certainly can bring romance, so keep that in mind. Be careful not to fall in love with the potential, though, rather than the reality. We can end up, these signs can end up going into fantasy land. Now, we've got a Sag new moon on the 7th, which which squares the Mars-Neptune conjunction. That's the only Mars-Neptune conjunction this year. So this could be an opportune time to see through the rose-tinted glasses and to really make a clear decision about romance, which is not always easy, particularly for Pisces energy, because it really loves the dreaminess and the romance. But that really, the Sag new moon might be a turning point about, okay, I can see this person as they are. What do I really choose? Now, keep in mind that the Sun squares Sag squares Chiron on the 19th, which also affects these two signs, the Virgo Pisces axis, and can bring some, offers insights into old relationship hurts. So finally, the Venus in Scorpio square Neptune, which we've already mentioned on solstice, can also be very, very powerful romantically for the Virgo Venus signs. And of course, the Virgo Pisces signs. And of course, the difference is that Virgo tends to be more practical with things, whereas Pisces, it can kind of go a little bit more into dreamland. So there are a little bit differences in how these two react. But it certainly feels like a very powerful month for healing, integration, motivation, and also I would add for some clarity. So quite a month, really, isn't it, Armand? For a lot. I mean, and considering that there's two major holidays, there's more than two actually, but certainly there's solstice, which is kind of comes, and then for people who celebrated the Christmas holidays, but even if people are not celebrating it, there's still all the fanfare around that. We cannot insulate ourselves from that, regardless of spiritual beliefs or whatever. So it's certainly a busy month in terms of meeting people, encountering family. So keep all of these things in mind as well when you are meeting your family and friends. That if there are times that we've mentioned that you're maybe a little bit more vulnerable because you've got a lot of planets or angles in those signs, to really take care of yourself a little bit more, to get some time out, particularly as you said, Armand, the air signs, socialize in larger groups. For the other signs, maybe find some pockets of time where you can be on your own, maybe to be creative. Even just getting, putting in your earphones and listening to nice music, particularly if you're a water sign, can really be incredibly helpful during these times. And of course, the usual things like meditation, go out and get some fresh air, take a walk, just find ways to really look after yourself, because there's a lot of things going on emotionally for, a lot of the signs really this December, and it's a pretty intense time. So really look after yourself, and we look forward to seeing you again for the start of the new year in January. Can't believe it'll be a new year, 2019.
It will be a new year.
I know.
But we'll see folks before then with the new moon videos and the full moon videos too. So
absolutely, and don't forget our daily posts on our Facebook page, of course.
Of course.
See you next month. Bye-bye.